Welcome back, folks. Welcome back to another episode of Get Good. My name is Ian Young, and today I have Vincent with us to talk about a very, very interesting topic of exploring your career goals, your career path. And Vincent, perhaps you can introduce yourself to our viewers.
So I'm RCD's employment support manager for a project.
Okay. So when we talk about exploring our career paths, what kind of suggestions do you have for your clients?
Well, I think it's very important to just make connections depending on how you are in life. Create connections as much as possible and just try to just see if you'd be able to kind of create these connections and also kind of expand on them. So maybe in the future, you might someone might think that you're appropriate for their job, and they might just call you up and wonder if you're working.
So it's all about these connections. And how can we get these connections, like without finding and being employed in your first job? How can we find all these connections?
Well, you actually find these connections. There's actually many different ways you could find these connections. For example, say you're in school, you might have some friends or classmates that you might just kind of connect and might be more comfortable with. Right. Or you could just do some volunteering as well. Yeah. That's always a good option.
Absolutely. Volunteer work is a great way to establish that connections. I remember I was volunteering in several different organizations just to find out what's a good fit for me, because I want to know what's it like working here in this kind of environment, what's it like working there in that kind of environment. That way, with actual volunteer experience, I get a good understanding. Thank you. Now, I want to talk about work culture. Work culture factors in. It's a very important part in finding your right career path. And basically, work culture is the environment that you work in, right? So, Vincent, how can we find out what an organization's work culture is like? Is there something that we can ask during the interview, or is there something that we can do before we totally commit to a job like that?
Well, that's interesting. You can kind of pose the question during an interview that you can just ask the person, "Oh, what is your work culture like?" And depending on their answer, it might be a good answer, but other than that, I'm not sure about like what kind of questions you could actually ask to kind of see exactly what the work culture is like. But I think just posing that question in the very beginning would kind of indicate to the employer that you're willing to kind of work with them if you're kind of connecting.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. I mean, like one of the questions that you may not want to ask right away is like, oh, what's overtime like? Right? Mm-hmm. Is it a common routine for people to stay behind and work overtime? Because in some work culture, it's kind of expected that you stay beyond the 5 o'clock limit and you continue to work. And some of the question, it's very important, when most of the staff at the organization is working overtime, and once you got into the job, you're like, oh, should I leave at 5? But everybody's still here. What should I do? Mm-hmm. That's kind of the awkward moment to find out. So it's better to ask ahead of time instead of finding out at the moment as you were employed. Mm-hmm. So that's something that I would definitely suggest. Now, this comes to a term that I want to show everybody. It's been on recent news. It's quite a popular term. Okay, this term here is called quiet quitting. I recently, CTV had an article about quiet quitting, and they described this as essentially describes employees setting boundaries to prevent burnout and adhering to them by starting work when they're scheduled to and doing the work they're assigned to and leaving on time. And this term was originally coined by a TikTok user, ZK Chilling, and he defined it as you're not outright quitting your job, but you're quitting the idea of going above and beyond. You're still performing your duties, but you're no longer subscribing to the hustle culture mentality that work has to be your life. The reality, it's not. And your worth as a person is not defined by your labor. Okay, so these are the terminologies from quiet quitting. And as we go on with today's session, I have more definitions. It's very interesting that in the workforce, there are so many different terminologies to describe how everybody's feeling. Okay, so quiet quitting. Vincent, what do you think about that?
Well, yeah, I kind of agree, and with the concept that we shouldn't be there all the time. We shouldn't be thinking about work all the time, and that mentality should change, definitely.
Yeah, but like the thing is to prevent burnout. I think this became popular during the pandemic when everybody's kind of working from home and they just didn't know how to clock out. It's like at home I'm doing my daily life, but at home I'm also doing my work. So at some point things spill over beyond 5 o'clock, or they started before your 8 o'clock shift or 9 o'clock shift, and people were just scratching their heads. Oh, I don't know how to stop working, right? So, and slowly and steadily that became a burnout. Basically, it's the style, the route to being burnout.
And I do believe they work a little bit longer because of the pandemic, and that should change. I think there is also a study that says that if you work more than 50 hours per week, your productivity actually decreases because of the burnout and everything like that. So yeah, definitely we should consider just maybe trying out new things.
And it's common for some work cultures to work 10 hours, 9 hours a day, right? It's not uncommon to hear that. I know in some folks from Asia background, for example, they work very, very long hours, and that's just part of the work culture. And this is nothing new, of course, according to this article that we read from CTV News. It's just a way for staff to express that, okay, let's take it back down a notch and go easy before you start burning out and become losing all interest with the company, right? So this is the term of quiet quitting. Okay, the next term that I want to talk about, it's called coasting. So yes, it's very interesting terminologies. So coasting is defined as clocking in and out while getting the bare minimum done. Okay, so there's a difference between the two terms, right? Because quiet quitting is that you're doing what you're expected to do, but you're just not going beyond that. But whereas coasting is like you're absolutely slacking off. This is bad. So if a staff is coasting, no good. You're expected to be fired. Okay, so any comments on this one?
Well, yeah, I agree with you, because coasting is there could be someone that's better at your job, and why wouldn't the employer consider that person instead of you if you're just going to be just sitting around doing basically just the bare minimum?
Yeah, and remember, in some organizations it's very competitive. Someone is always able to replace you and do your work. So it's also a good idea to work hard to show that you really care about your work. And that way you can first avoid the problem of coasting. And secondly, hey, there's a chance for promotion after that. Okay, so another term that when I was reading about all these labor terminologies is quite an interesting one, and I think this next one is also as a result of the pandemic. Presenteeism. My goodness, this is a new word. So, from my understanding, anything that ends with ism is not a good thing. So, this word is defined as being physically in your seat at work just to look dedicated, no matter how unproductive. Okay, so this is an article from BBC Work Life, just to talk about the concept of presenteeism and why it's bad. And we should always measure productivity instead of presenteeism. Okay, so Vincent, what do you think of this term?
I do agree why people like it so much. Just seeing someone at their desk, you just might as well think, okay, they're probably being productive, even though you don't really know exactly what they're doing. I do think it needs to be, if it needs to be changed, I do think it needs to be changed at an institutional level, and then just trickles down. Yeah.
I also think there's a human factor involved, right? As you know, this person is right next to your desk, appear to be very hardworking, buying you coffee from time to time. There's certain connection that is established, and that's a human connection, right? It may not be related to productivity at all, but nonetheless, there's a bond that's forming, and sometimes that's the beginning of favoritism. So if that person sitting next to you is, a manager, well, most likely, one way or the other, you will form that bond, and then you will form that favoritism. And this is why this particular term is pointing out to us that, well, we should always measure productivity. Okay, very good. Now, anything to add before we move on to the next topic?
Yeah, I think these descriptions that you've mentioned, Ian, they have a lot of things that are interesting about it, and even like hearing about it just draws more and more questions. So just please, if you have any questions, feel free to just write it on the comments and everything, and we'll be sure to see if we can answer that.
Yeah. I mean, this is like to some of us, this is all new. Like all these new terminologies. Wow, this goes so deep within the workforce, and it's something that we should read about. Now, Vincent, let's talk about your project. Are you still recruiting people? What's the situation like?
Yes, we're still recruiting people. Although we recently had a job fair, which was very successful. So we're still trying to manage talking with those type of people that applied for our project. So our project, again, it's youth between 16 and 30 that can work in Canada, and we try to kind of connect them with employers and see if we could kind of match them up with some work experience.
Awesome. And these are paid work experience?
Yeah, precisely. So it's for sustainable employment. So we look for eligible employers that have that sustainability in mind. So that they might be able to hire them afterwards if they think that the employee is suitable for the position.
Awesome. So folks, if you're out there needing a little extra help in terms of finding employment, maybe this is the right project for you. And do visit our website for more information, and you can always connect with Vincent. This is all the time we have for today. Thank you, Vincent, for coming on.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, folks, for joining us, and I'll see you all next month. Thank you.
Cheers.